Dave Talbot and myself have been collaborating on a historical reconstruction for over 40 years now. I thought the audience might be interested in a walk down memory lane and a bit of ancient history. The following video is the first of several that will attempt to outline our principal findings. In 1979, shortly after the publication of the archaic Sumerian hymn, The Exaltation of Inanna, I wrote an article arguing that Inanna as the planet Venus was best understood as a comet-like phenomenon. I was inspired to investigate the Inanna traditions by the eccentric writings of Immanuel Velikovsky, whose Worlds in Collision had caused a scientific uproar when it was published in 1950. It was Velikovsky's claim that Venus presented the appearance of a giant comet during the mid-second millennium BCE, and that this catastrophic event could be used as a benchmark to launch a revolutionary new approach to ancient chronology. Shortly thereafter, while attending a Chronos-sponsored symposium in Princeton, New Jersey, I was informed of the recent publication of the Saturn myth by one David Talbot. Talbot, will be remembered, was the publisher of the seminal and hugely popular Pensées series during the early 1970s, examining the scientific basis of Velikovsky's writings. Upon contacting Dave by phone, I learned that he too had arrived at much the same conclusion vis-a-vis the cometary origins of the Inanna traditions. Finding a kindred spirit in Dave, we eventually agreed to jointly author a series of articles for Chronos on the Venus comet. The basic thrust of our findings was that, yes, while Venus did indeed present the appearance of a comet-like apparition in the distant past, since the catastrophic events in question were already attested in the earliest Sumerian and Egyptian texts dating to the 3rd millennium BCE, such events most likely occurred during the prehistoric period and thus could not be used as a linchpin in any reconstruction of biblical or Homeric chronology, as per Velikovsky's thesis. During the 80s and 90s, Dave and I continued to fine-tune and bolster our historical reconstruction, this while authoring dozens of scholarly articles on comparative mythology. We also traveled about the U.S. and Canada presenting our findings. In the mid-90s, Dave and I were regular participants on such internet fora as Talk Origins and SciAstro, where we argued our case and debated top astronomers and other scientists. Suffice it to say that during the decades in question, our arguments fell on deaf ears both within a catastrophist community as well as within the scientific community at large. In 1994, Dave published The Great Comet, Venus in Aeon, a masterful analysis of the cometary imagery attached to the planet Venus in ancient sources. In 2001, I published The Many Faces of Venus, offering a cross-cultural analysis of Venus mythology. Other books fleshing out the evidence pertaining to Venus's recent catastrophic past followed in subsequent decades. From my perspective, the jury is in. During the relatively recent prehistorical period, the planet Venus was involved in a series of extraordinary catastrophes involving the planet Earth and other neighboring planets, during which it moved on a different orbit than at present and presented the appearance of a long-haired, comet-like apparition. Short of a shared delusion, how is it possible to explain the confidence of Talbot and I in the general accuracy of our historical reconstruction? The short answer is the compelling nature and apparent universality of the human testimony pertaining to Venus's former comet-like behavior. Briefly, Talbot and I analyzed the mythological and linguistic traditions attached to Venus in archaic cultures around the globe in order to discover whether common patterns could be found. Those patterns which were otherwise inexplicable by reference to the present solar system were of especial interest and, in our judgment, sealed the case. Very early on, Dave and I noticed that Venus was directly connected with a cosmic tie or band of some sort. In ancient Mesopotamia, for example, the planet Venus was intimately associated with the royal headband marking the king as a universal sovereign. The Sumerian word for the headband in question is mush, a word which is written with the very pictograph denoting Venus in the earliest Sumerian script. Quote, numerous texts mention the mush as a kind of headband or diadem which is tied on deities and kings, end of quote. As more than one scholar has noted, the pictograph in question certainly resembles a pre-scientific picture of a comet. As we have documented, analogous traditions will be found around the globe. In ancient Mesoamerica, for example, The planet Venus was specifically associated with the verb kal, to tie, a term used to describe the tying on of the royal headband during coronation rites. Venus's apparent connection with the tying on of the royal headband, in turn, corresponds precisely to Inanna's function in Mesopotamian royal iconography, where she is said to secure or tie on kingship. Already during the 3rd millennium BCE, Inanna Venus is said to tie on the kingship for an early king. Quote, "When Inanna had tied the lordship with the kingship for Lugal-Kinadu, she let him exert lordship in Uruk." End of quote. Now here is an interesting, albeit unexpected and improbable finding. What in the world could the distant planet Venus possibly have to do with the royal headband and the origins of kingship? As Talbot and I suggested in our very first article together, the Venus tie had reference to a celestial band that, at a decisive juncture in Earth history, appeared to encircle or otherwise crown or adorn the planet Mars. A classic example of this motif occurs already in the Pyramid text, wherein Isis Venus was credited with tying on a headband on Horus, the latter identifiable with the planet Mars. Quote, "She who tied on the headband on her son Horus as a young boy in Akhbit." End of quote. The Egyptian word for headband here is MDH. The Egyptian hieroglyph depicting this royal tie, in turn, is virtually indistinguishable from the pictograph employed to denote the planet Venus in the early Mesopotamian script. The fact that both ideograms were employed to describe the headbanding of the king during the sacred coronation ritual confirms their fundamental affinity and suggests that their spiraling volute-like form traces to a common celestial prototype. Egyptologists have long noted that Isis Venus was celebrated as a kingmaker. Witness the following observation of Jan Assmann, a renowned Egyptologist. As mother of the Horus child, Isis is the bestower of legitimate kingship. Isis is the kingmaker par excellence. End of quote. If the historical reconstruction offered here is based upon an accurate reading of the ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian sources, it follows that Venus's crowning of Mars is a decidedly extraordinary celestial event, and as such was likely witnessed around the globe. It stands to reason, therefore, that such memorable events would be reflected in the sacred traditions of other ancient cultures, this despite the fact that this particular conjunction of planets is impossible in the modern sky, i.e., as a superior planet, Mars cannot appear in front of Venus in order to be crowned by it. Is there any evidence, then, that ancient cultures conceptualized the planet Venus as a crown? The ancient cultures of Mesoamerica had a long history of astronomical observation, and as a result, more than one of their few remaining codices attest to a detailed knowledge of astronomical phenomenon. Maya astronomers took a keen interest in Venus and succeeded in calculating that planet's period to within a fraction of its true value, 584 days. In this instance, as in various other astronomical achievements, the Maya rivaled anything achieved by contemporary astronomers of the Old World. How curious, then, to find that certain hieroglyphs believed to represent the planet Venus are occasionally depicted as crowning kings and gods in these same codices. Plate 45 of Codex Borgia, for example, depicts a denizen of the underworld with a Venus crown. According to Bruce Bylan, a noted authority on the Codex, the enthroned figure wears a Venus star as his headdress. Maya monuments elsewhere represent the planet Venus as a half-star. In light of this fact, it is notable to find that the half-star elsewhere appears as a crown-like headdress. As Talbot and I have emphasized since our first writings on the subject, it is important to underscore the formative nature of these astronomical events involving Venus and Mars. In ancient Mesopotamia, as in the New World, it is the tying on of the Venusian headband that makes the king. A Sumerian text describes the situation exactly. Quote, "Ninurta put on a crown as a sign of kingship, tied on a lapis lazuli mouche as a sign of inship." End of quote. According to the Sumerian king list and other early texts, kingship descended from heaven. There is much truth in this archaic belief. Indeed, Sumerian texts make it clear that it is the planet Venus who endows the local king with kingship. Thus it is that the mythical king Enmerkar announces in an early hymn, quote, "My kingship the starry lady gave me," end of quote. The word translated as starry here is mul, to shine or radiate, a verb formed from the Sumerian word for star, mul, and hence referring to the luminous splendor of Venus itself. The clear import of this passage, accordingly, is that kingship itself is a gift of the planet Venus. Far from being figurative in nature, the language of this early hymn is best understood in literal fashion. It is the planet Venus who makes the king by investing him with a luminous headband or crown of glory. What is true of the rights of kingship is also true of the primary rights surrounding marriage, the founding of temples, the layout of ancient cities, and other rudiments of human civilization. Simply put, human civilization as we know it would not be recognizable without the extraterrestrial stimulus provided by mind-altering catastrophes associated with the neighboring planets.